So, hi guys, how are you? Nice to see you again. Hope all is well out there in the big wide world. So, let's continue looking at the mind and the brain, which is what we were looking at last class. Remember, we looked at those different expressions like mind-boggling, something that you could not imagine. Like this situation is completely mind-boggling, as Adrienne said. Yes. Or a brain teaser. Can you remember brain teaser? Yeah, like an enigma, a little puzzle that you can't work out what the answer is. Maybe a brainchild, a brilliant idea. Yes. Okay, like somebody's brainchild to do these videos. Okay, so let's move on. Bear those expressions in mind, remember them, bear them in mind, and we're going to look at how the world of neuroscience has changed. Okay, how in the past, what it looked like, the possibilities were like. Okay, it's one of the areas of science where we've seen a very big advance. Okay, so I'd like you to open your books on page 92. Okay, page 92. There you can see the picture of a guy undergoing some sort of brain neuroimaging, checking his brain waves. Okay, remember, brain wave has two meanings. It has the literal meaning that we see here, the brain waves, the measurements of activity as we think, and also a brainwave, a brilliant idea. Okay, so the title, On the Crest of a Brainwave, is also playing with that idea. On the crest of something means that you're at the height of something. So it's talking here at being the successful, or how neuroimaging and neuroscience has become more and more successful in its attempts to understand the brain. But it wasn't always that way. In this article, it's writing from the viewpoint of 1990s people, what they expected to happen in their future. Okay, in other words, their future, not ours. This is talking about the future from a past point of view. But first, let's read the article, interesting article, and find two uses that the article provides of how brainwave technology could be used. Okay, we'll read it together. So, neuroimaging technology developed in the 1990s allowed researchers to monitor brain activity for the first time. Psychologists were aiming to find out how acquiring new skills, such as speaking a foreign language, could affect the structure of the brain. They assumed that these changes would not take place at the same rate in older people and wanted to find out if there was an optimal age for learning a language. Back in the 1990s, the current developments in neuroimaging technology would have been impossible to imagine. But today, scientists are teaching people to use brainwaves to actually control electronic devices. It'll soon be possible to change the TV channel simply by thinking you would rather watch something more interesting. And there are even efforts to create systems that would allow us to have our thoughts appear in a smartphone message without even having to type. The benefits of developments like these might seem trivial, but for those who are unable to communicate through speech, they represent a major breakthrough advance. Rosemary Johnson, a young violinist who suffered brain damage in an accident 3 decades ago, thought she was never going to be able to make music again. Now, thanks to the latest developments in neuroimaging technology, she is able to use her brainwaves to direct other musicians to play the sequence of notes she wants to hear. Rosemary can, once again, communicate through music as she did before. Wow, that's great, eh? So, a couple of uses. Well, that's right. In the 1990s, they'd already developed ways to help brainwaves control electronic devices. The hope was that we would be able to change TV channels or send messages just thinking about them. Has that happened? No. Sometimes technology moves faster than you imagine, but sometimes not as quickly. I mean, I remember when I was a child watching science fiction movies, series, and they presumed that people would be living on Mars or going on virtual holidays or flying cars into the year 2010, that sort of thing. Or if you read a book like 2001, A Space Odyssey, which was written in the 1960s, the idea they had of the future, well, we never quite managed it in that way. Perhaps we advanced in other ways. Perhaps there were other breakthroughs. So yes, one thing that they thought, well, one thing they'd already done was enable people to control electronic systems, and they were hoping, future, in the past, they were hoping to be able to change TV channels just by thinking about it. It'd be a big fight in my house. Also, the second use that was actually a reality then in the 1990s was that musician who was finally able to use her brainwaves to help other musicians play the sequence of notes that she wanted. Amazing. Okay. So here's a question for you. Can you imagine any possible unethical uses of neuroimaging technology? I suppose we're all worried about brainwashing, brain control, attacking our freedom of thought maybe, all those sort of things. Do you think the benefits of neuroimaging technology outweigh the potential dangers? Well, in my opinion, probably yes, if we're thinking about brain injuries and so on. As with all things, it's a tool which can be used for bad things and for good things. I think the reality is, as we see with telephones and the internet, the majority of use for human beings at the moment is quite trivial. Okay, who knows? Probably we'll find neuroimaging and brainwave technology will be used for very trivial things like changing TV channels. Well, we won't have TVs, but whatever. Okay, so let's look at the idea of the future in the past. Okay, this text is imagining what people in the 1990s thought the future would be like. Okay, look at the underlined verbs. There are 6 underlined verbs. We're using different forms to make the future ideas. What are they? What's the idea? So psychologists were aiming to find out. Okay, we're aiming. That's right, past continuous there. Not, we would normally say I'm aiming, just going into the past for a future intention or plan, I suppose you could say, to see how foreign languages could affect. Okay, could, might affect. So that's probably a future possibility. We're using could there. These changes would not take place at the same rate. They thought these changes would not take place. That's would not replacing won't. So it's a future prediction. Number 4, I wanted to find out if there was an optimal age. Okay, I think this is sort of like a future fact. Okay, that's what they wanted to see. Back in 1990s, the current developments would have been impossible to imagine. It's kind of like a reverse prediction, but it's a prediction idea. They couldn't have predicted it. Okay. Number 6, she was never going to be able to make music. We use was going to plus the verb when we're talking about a future in the past. To talk about something which didn't happen but we wanted to happen. Or in this case, something that we thought wouldn't happen but did. So, for example, I often use it for things like, I was going to call you. It was my intention, but I didn't. So it's often used for unfulfilled intentions. Okay, there is a grammar reference at the back on page 161. You could read that if you wish before you go. And with page 161 there are some activities, okay? We'll get back to those for a moment. But let's see if we can use your instinct a bit for it first. Remember, the future in the past is often used to talk about a change of plan, often used to make excuses for things you haven't done. Scientists were planning to study, would have studied, were going to study, but they decided that the experiment was or would be unethical. Okay? So it's often got this idea of a future that didn't happen because they changed their minds or because things went by a different way. You know, we in the 1970s they thought people would be living on the moon by this time, but they were wrong. Okay, things that didn't happen. Look at part 5. Pause the video. Choose the correct option for each of the 6 sentences. Okay, and then we'll check. Okay, so you pause the video? Good. So the government was considering, that idea of something in progress, thinking about doing in the future but didn't. Past continuous. Was considering. Number 2, I was sure my mum was going to be angry. But the reality, she wasn't. Again, we've got that contrast between what we thought was going to happen and what really happened. Here we've got a reality. I never dreamt that I would win the lottery. Okay? I still can't believe it. I never dreamt that I would win. So we've got will going to would. And he says, I'll never win the lottery. I will never. We change it back to would. Number 4, we were hoping. That's right, we were hoping. It's quite common, these verbs like we're aiming, we're hoping, we're planning in this form. Okay, to talk about future intentions, hopes, dreams. We were hoping to get tickets, but they had all sold out, so we didn't. The lessons would have been cancelled, but too many students had already arrived, so the lesson wasn't cancelled. When I set off for work this morning, I had no idea it was going to take 3 hours to get there. A long time, to get to work. Obviously lives in London. I remember I used to take 3 hours sometimes to come home if I missed one connection. If I missed a connection, I'd have to wait to a train station for about an hour for the next one. It was quite frustrating. Okay, well, lots of interesting things there. Just imagine how the future might be different for you now. It's different now to what you were imagining when you were younger. I'm sure it was. I know for me, I could never have imagined I would be in Spain. I thought I was going to be living in England. I thought I would, maybe when I was younger, I thought I would live in a house similar to my parents and that I would have 2 children, and I imagined that I was going to work in an office as an accountant like my father. The reality was completely different. I'm here, stuck in my room talking to you. But that's fine. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Hope to speak to you again soon. Remember, feel free to get in touch with me. You know the email address, it's blugos@gmx.com. You can get in touch with me, and I want you to do the exercise at the back of the book. Okay, I'm going to show you. It's page 161, 62. Okay, it's the exercise here on page 162, where you use one word to complete the future and past sentences. There are 6 of them. Okay, you send me those sentences or the word you use. Okay, before you do it, perhaps you could read this part, Future in the Past, Unit 9. Okay? But we'll call it a day, and we'll speak soon. Goodbye.